Well, hello again. Today I want to show you the new features on the Bible study forum. Uh, Taking, for example, the Sunday school lesson for 2 Corinthians 4 1 through 12. Um, the steps are the same. However, as you will see on the screen, we will be giving more room for your response. So let's get started today. First thing, step one, of course, is the observation. As you see on the screen, observation. Um, and what we're looking for is to show some differences between the different translations. The question I will ask is, what are the words used in each group translation for not giving up? Okay. For example, here in the New Living Translation says, "We never give up." And New International Version says, "We do not lose heart." Um, in the New American Standard, "We do not lose heart." And in King James Version, "We faint not." So those are what we're looking at, the differences we want to put there. Next thing is, why is the translation of verse 2 in the New Living Translation more of a paraphrase? We've talked about a paraphrase. A paraphrase is where the translators take a lot of liberty with the text. Instead of translating it a word for word translation, they interpose their own meaning, which we call eisegesis. So we see this consistently, pretty well consistently, with the New Living Translation of the Scripture. And so here we see it again, and I want you to be able to see that and notice that and put it in the information there. Um, and then on verse 3, why do you think that the King James Version used a past tense for loss? It says, "But if our gospel be hid, it is hid to them that are lost." Uh, and really, I meant there what to be hid is past tense. Uh, why is it using past tense opposed to the present tense of the other gospel? Notice that they said uh, in the New American Standard, it is veiled to those who are perishing, perishing as a present tense in the Greek text, as opposed to the past tense in the King James Version. And then verse 4, why is the translation of the New Living Translation a paraphrase other than a translation as seen in the other versions? And again, we see that, and I've explained earlier how they went about in translating, really paraphrasing, or in a sense making a commentary, as opposed to allowing the readers to interpret for themselves. They seem to have a mission of interposing their uh, interpretation. However, uh, this text, it needs to be seen because of the fact that you need to be able to compare uh, those type of things. And then we looked at verse 5. What are the similarities of the translation? There are some similarities that are there. I'm not looking for the differences here, but how are they similar? And for we preach in King James, not ourselves but Christ. New Living, the New International, for what we preach is not ourselves but Christ. It's a pretty obvious answer there. And in verse 6, what are the differences in the New American Standard and the New International? At this point, as opposed to looking at the similarities, here we will look at what are the differences in the New American Standard and the New International Translation. And then we go to verse 7. How does the New International Version and the New uh, Living Translation modernize the verse? And of course, this is what the New Living Translation seems is trying to do. However, again, they're breaking the rules of interpretation many times, but trying to make it modern so that people can understand it in our vernacular. Uh, And then in verse 8, how does the New Living Translation use the word trouble in rearranging the text? Notice they said in verse 8, we are pressed on every side by troubles, but we're not crushed. Whereas New American says we are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not despairing, and not even using the word troubled, as the King James Version used the word troubled, and as the New Living Translation used the word trouble. They do not use the word troubled or troubles. So how does the New Living Translation rearrange really the King James Version translation? And then verse 9, what is the difference between hunted and persecuted? Here there is a word choice of the New American Standard, King James, and New National consistently use the word persecuted, whereas when we get to the New Living Translation, we see the word hunted. So what is the difference? Is there a difference between hunted and persecuted? And of course, you put your answer in the blank. And then we get to verse 10. How does the New Living Translation make a big leap in the translation? It becomes a commentary instead of translation at this point. And the answer is very obvious of their what they're doing, and I want you to, of course, put it in the blank. And then we get down to verse 11. How does the different translations deal with the verb delivered? The King James Version says we're always delivered. The New American Standard says being delivered. Again, a present tense. New International agrees there. And of course, the New Living Translation does their own thing again. Excuse me. And then we get to the last verse, verse 12. Notice again the paraphrasing and commentating of New Living Translation. How is it done in this verse? And of course, that's again an obvious answer. So that's the translation. And then we move down to the grammatical. Again, what I have done, I have chosen particular words, and that you will be able to see, and that needs special emphasis. I did not, of course, take every word of the Greek New Testament, because it would take too much time, and it'd be a lot more work than what we would have the time for. Not saying that those words are not important, but I'm trying to emphasize the most important ones at this point. And so we start out with the word diakonos. We've heard this word before, deacon, but it's more than about one particular office. It really means a ministry. And so what I want you to do here is discuss, and looking at the different references, discuss and list the different ways that diakonos is used from the references. And of course, this hyperlink, you can go to these different references. They're going to, of course, be in the Greek, and the English will follow it. It is a interlinear. And then what you need to do, make sure that you hit your back button, the back button on your computer. By that way, you can get back to the form. And so the first question is, how's the word diakonos, of course, used in this reference? And then discuss the differences, as I already said in the first question. And then we get the word renounce, and it means to give up, using accusative of the thing. That's a Greek. It's a Greek grammar there, and the Irish middle means past tense, and the person is acting themselves, or being acted on. So what are the implications suggested by the word renounce? And then we get to the verse 2. We're going to compare and contrast the good and bad ways that craftiness or skill is used. He talks about we renounce craftiness. But then again in Proverbs, it tells us that prudence or skill or craftiness, in a sense, if you will, could be a good thing. So I want you to look at those verses and see what the differences are. And then we get to verse 3, and we're looking at the word concealed. We did not conceal, did not cover up the gospel. So what has been hidden or concealed in this verse? And there are other verses that you need to bring in by way of just understanding what that word means. And then we get down to the word to beam forth, to shine forth, to radiate, seems to be. And so here I just simply want you to put in your own words how this word emphasizes the shining forth of the Christian witness. And then we get to verse 4. We pick up the word image or icon. We hear a lot about icons today. You have icons on your computer screen, excuse me. And so here we want you to simply tell how is Christ an icon of God. And then we look in verse 7 and we pick up the word treasure. It's a lot of emphasis on this word because the gospel is a treasure that the believers have believed. And so I want you to look at this word study and distinguish between the different ways that treasure is used. And then how is treasure, of course, used in this passage. And then we get down to verse 7, and we talk about we look at the word earthen. This is an earthen vessel, which basically means something that's fragile. And make sure you look at these references, Jeremiah 39:14. Even in the Old Testament, it's going to give you the Hebrew of this, but it's important. It will give you some enlightenment. So what is fragile according to this verse? And then we look in verse 7, the word vessel. How is the believer a frail vessel of God from these references? And then in verse 8, we look at the word being hard pressed. So here you're going to discuss the different ways and situation that press is used. In distress, putting in a narrow sense, narrow pressure is put upon you. You'll see these references that will bring that out. And then we get down to verse 8 also, and that word's kind of still been emphasized, but it's used the word stonechromonino, which means been crushed. So how is the believer crushed, and what should be his or her response? And then in verse 8, continue the word Paul talking about being perplexed. So how were the apostles left in straits, or being perplexed, or being without? What is he talking about? And of course, look at the other references. And then in verse 8, are we despairing? So how were the apostles not despairing? Compare the word in its context to give the true meaning of the word, and then show how the apostles were not despairing, irregardless to their situation. Their situation could not overcome their determination and their faith in God, which is a very good thing, and we need that continually as believers. We'll find ourselves in situations that will change, and sometimes it look like they won't change, but we must still not despair and keep our eyes upon God and be faithful regardless to the situation. And in verse 9, being persecuted. How is persecution a harassment? Well, that will be brought out in the meaning of the word harass, to trouble, to molest one, to persecute, to mistreat one. So look at the different verses and show a pattern. There's a pattern in how persecution is used in these scriptures, and you should see that it is something that is forced upon one, as the persecuted passively receives the action of the persecutor. They're not asking for the persecution, but then again, they're not resisting in the sense that they're trying to get back at the persecutor. They know that this is part of the Christian life, and they are receiving it as such. And then, of course, we get down